Today we're going to show you how to modify this Nerf Ultra 2 for amazing firepower. Hey everybody, I'm Jonathan and this is Damaged Darts, where we specialize in converting ordinary Nerf blasters into extraordinary prop blasters from popular video games and movies, and show you how you can do it too. If you like what you see on this channel, won't you be so kind as to smash that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, leave a thumbs up like, and a positive comment below. Today we're going to show you how to modify the internals of the Nerf Ultra 2 for the ultimate firepower. So let's get started. Alright, let's open this up and see what we got to work with. Alright everybody, so there is the big reveal of what is inside the Nerf Ultra 2. So looks like we've got some pretty beefy flywheels here, and the motors seem to be a bit bigger as well, a little bit more meaty there. We've got a couple switches that we're going to be taking out. This is that jam door switch, we're going to get rid of that. These are the positive and negative contacts. Looks like there's a little resistor there. We're going to remove all the resistors. We got our negative lead and our positive lead. We'll be sending that over to a light, actually changing this out for a larger gauge wire to go to the battery case, which will fit perfectly our mini 11.1 volt LiPo. We're going to do this again on a budget build. So we're going to keep the motors we've got, take out all the switches that we don't need, and then put right here in the handle the high voltage cherry rev switch in place of this one, and then rewire everything to a thicker gauge wire, especially right in here, and then send out and then attach that to a 11.1 volt LiPo battery, and we should be good to go. So that's what we're going to do next. Now before we start to disassemble pieces here to get down to the nitty-gritty, what again I always advise is make sure you take a reference photo, be it with a digital camera, of course, now that or with your smartphone. Smartphones are prevalent, everybody's got a smartphone practically, so just take a snapshot or two or three with your smartphone for reference later on to put everything back together. So that's what I'm going to do. Another thing I wanted to point out before we start disassembling this is I was always curious on what mechanism pushed the dart from the cylinder here through to the flywheels, and here it is. So right now I've got that locking mechanism in and I want to get rid of that, but when you push the trigger, that engages this lever right here to push, so it pushes this way, and it's got this lever action piece here to push the dart portion here to push the dart through the cylinder into the flywheels. That's what the mechanism looks like, everybody, for the dart pusher. Alright, so let's start disassembling this thing. Alright, so here is the motor. It does look quite a bit beefier than the Strife. These things are mega huge. Pretty much a cross between the Strife and a rival. So I think these are going to handle just fine, and we're not going to need to, well, we're not going to need to upgrade the motors at all. We're just going to take this whole resistor board off of here, undo all of these little resistors here. Oh, that one's crushed right there almost. Anywho, we're going to get rid of this, get rid of all these wires right here, get rid of these because that's where the battery is going to go, and replace this switch with a high rev cherry switch. So I'm going to get my soldering iron and get this stuff off of here. That's pretty much all we're going to need to do, so we can keep everything intact here, which is super awesome. We don't have to mess around with the mechanics there, just taking care of this rev switch, battery, and motor system. Alright, so I went ahead and completed the wiring on the motors here. Now, all you have to do is just take your time on prying this board off of here. You just got to heat up the contacts with your soldering iron and just gradually pry them up. There is a clip here you can kind of unclip the board with and put it underneath. That'll act as leverage to push it up as you heat up the contacts and pop it up. But you're also going to, I would recommend unhitching these little breakers, these little resistors rather, on all four contacts here on the side of the motors. To release those first, just use some tweezers and pull those wires away. Then undo the clip to prop it up, and then heat up those contacts, and you should get a pretty even pop off of this board. And just toss that. You don't need that. Now it can be, I gotta make note that it's misleading. You've got a positive here and a negative here, and it's flipped on this side. That is not the case when you wire it. Otherwise you're gonna have problems. You're gonna have one motor working against you. You've got to make sure you wire it in parallel, so you get your positives here, your negatives here. Make sure you do that so things move properly on the flywheels to pull the dart through rather than serve as basically a stopper for it. If you got to, which I did here, I always do that just to be sure. If I haven't modded a flywheel in a while, is just draw some Sharpie marker on here and just test your motors out to make sure that they are both rolling this way to pull that dart through and out the barrel, to make sure you've got it wired. Otherwise you've just got to flip your polarity and change that result. So now I'm going to drop everything back in and give this thing a try. Alright, so I've pretty much finished everything here. I put a high rev switch here. I used some because I couldn't get any of the screws to match up to screw it into here. I just used some JB Weld epoxy putty. You can find this at any hardware store. It's just a putty that you just pinch off a little bit of whatever you need and mush it together. It's got a, well, depending on what kind you get, this one had a light blue and then a white middle, and then you just kind of mush it up until it appears to be a light white. You know, you got a good mix, and then it'll harden pretty fast, but I just went ahead and let it harden overnight to set everything there. On the rev switch, it's fine right here. It actually revved, but I wanted to make sure it had a nice firm contact, so I put a little blob of the epoxy putty on the end and then sanded that down. And it used to have a little cone-shaped spring here. I replaced that with another little spring I had laying around. You really don't need a spring there. Once you have this in place, it serves as its own spring. And I marked the two right here. I believe if you're using one of these worker mod switches, it's marked NO, and I put the I believe this is the battery. I don't think it really matters. It just connects the circuit basically. But I believe I've got the battery here, and I've got the motor here on this middle one right here, and the battery here. I do remember that. And then I used some. I would recommend using silicone casing wiring. It's much more flexible. But if you just have a hardware store to go to, this is actually hardware store wire. It's a 16 gauge, just standard wire. It's a little stiffer, but it worked for this project just fine. Just a little bit of jockeying around. In fact, it kind of stays, it might be better to use that because it stays in place and holds its form right here, as I got it arched down in here. I had to cut away some of the pieces of plastic that had smaller wire so that this would fit properly. Just used a utility knife to carve that away. Went underneath and of course removed that whole resistor block, got all that junk off of there, took out the little switch right here. We didn't need that, so it's just a standard rev switch, battery source, motors, that's it. And so I wired everything up into the JST connector, and it works great. In fact, when we get this back on, that rubber casing on the motor serves as a vibration guard, so it actually is a lot, in theory, so far it seems to be not as loud as you would find a modded Strife to be. So that's pretty much it, guys. I'm trying to remember if there's anything else I did other than that. That's it. So we're pretty much set. Just make sure you have enough room for the wiring in here. I might need to actually cut away a little notch up in this shelf to make room for this JST connector I noticed, so I might need to shave a little bit of that out of the way, but that should be pretty much it. So again, there's a look at what I did with the wiring and the rev switch. We're ready to put it back together and give this thing a try. Alright, I remembered what component we need to put in. Well, first off, the trigger there, of course, but there's this little tiny piece. I think this is one of the locking mechanisms. It may not be that important, but I just wanted to keep everything as is. This little piece, it slides, if I can get this here, right up in here. There's a little slot, so I'm going to try and tilt this a little bit more. Right there, this feeds. There's a little tiny spring that's going to fall out. Be careful, keep your finger there, because it goes in like this inside that little slot, and that little piece sticking out right there fits just above this little spring and depresses the spring. So you're going to have to slide that little lever over the top of this compressed spring and up inside this slot into the barrel here. I think I think it is the locking mechanism. Once you finish your rounds, it stops. It's kind of nice to have, so you know if you're in the middle of a battle and like, oh, I don't have any more rounds, and then you pop them in. This might be something you want to keep in there, but may not be necessary. But just be careful when you're taking this thing apart and make note of that, how it goes back in. So I'm going to put that back in, and then we should be all ready to go. You're also going to need to take off this top part of the flywheel case too to get this thing slid in a lot better. Actually, that's probably the only way you're going to do it. So be sure to take this off and then put it back in. In fact, let's just do that together right now. So I'm going to go ahead and undo this top casing here, because the top casing actually has the slot that this fits into. And again, make sure you depress these little wedges here to slide out everything properly. Get it a little bit smaller piece here. Aha. There we go. Motor jocking here. Just need another screw here. Alright. Still a little bit more. Okay. Set that off to the side here. Now we've got a good shot to just drop this little piece in. Remember, be very careful, that little tiny spring. It actually goes. When we do this, I'll have to slide this motor out actually just a little bit. Put that wedge in there. Slide it in, see there's that little locking mechanism. Then we can put everything back down in there. Make sure your wires are lying in the wireway properly. What's this cracking? Yes, it's in the morning. I've got my morning husky voice. Alright, so we've got that little lever action there. And I think think everything's laying in place properly. So it's that one's a little tedious. Take your time on that. Make sure everything's firmly pressed and lined up with all the screw contacts there. There we go. And now we can put our case back on and we should be good to go. And don't forget your clips. Place here. And even as you screw them down, it will snap into place. So there it is, putting that little piece, that little locking mechanism in. I'm gonna spare you the time screwing this back together. So now I'm gonna drop the trigger in, get everything set, and give this a try officially. Yes, now we're gonna do it. All right, one more thing I've got to do before I get this thing back together is this little locking mechanism right here. I already took the little silver screw off right here, and I'm gonna move this back. Whoop, it already popped out. We're not going to need this piece, so we're going to toss that aside. One less complication here, just to keep things nice and simple. Less is more in this case, pretty much every mod case. So just removing that. I've got all my leads wired up as I need to with that high rev switch epoxy puttied in place. And I have that. I added a little dab of epoxy putty to the rev switch, to make a little bit more firmer contact with the lever there, and kind of sanded it down as I had need. Just a little bit more purchase there when I'm clicking the rev switch. That's ready to go. Now I think I've got everything set. I can just get the cage back onto the flywheel, put everything together, and give it a try. Yep, I'm back again. I found one other lock. There's one right here above the rev switch. We didn't need that. That kind of lock doesn't allow the trigger to push until the rev switch is pushed down. We didn't need that, so I popped that one out also to get this freedom of movement. So that was another one that had to go. I think I've taken care of all the other little nooks and crannies here, so now let's get it back together. Alright, so we're going to be shooting downrange here at our DIY Nerf target. If you haven't seen our tutorial on how you can make your very own, just click the card here and check that out. So we will be firing this fully modded Ultra 2, and it will go up to speeds of 126 FPS. So this thing really rips, so let's shoot a few rounds downrange and give this thing a try. Alright everybody, hope you enjoyed watching our tutorial on modifying the Nerf Ultra 2 for ultimate firepower. If you haven't subscribed to our channel already, just click the double D icon below. You'll help us create more cool content for your enjoyment and inspiration. Also check out some of our other videos. Until next time, I'm Jonathan, and this is Damaged Darts.